This is the beginning of the World War II presentation. We're going to begin World War II, part 1 of 3 presentations. We're going to begin looking at the Treaty of Versailles and the end of World War I, because World War I is kind of just a precursor to World War II. 20 years later, World War II begins, so we'll be looking at that. Just a reminder that as we go through this presentation, the images are in public domain. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email or give us a call. But we're going to start. This is the first of 3 presentations for World War for World War II. We're going to be looking at World War II Europe, World War II Pacific, and World War II home front. One of the first things we want to look at here is the Treaty of Versailles, and just a reminder that the Treaty of Versailles was the treaty to end World War I, and Hitler, of course, was a soldier during World War I, and Hitler's kind of main emphasis when he becomes the leader of Germany is to kind of one by one go back and cross off certain things that the Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to adhere to. So we're going to look at this as, in particular, Germany and their colonies being divided up, also the new nations that were created. So we'll look at this next slide, and it should become a little bit more clear. So Germany is being punished for World War I. Again, World War I, and some of the big points of emphasis here are that Germany has to accept the blame for World War I. Germany has to pay huge amounts of money called reparations to the winning side. Germany is forbidden to have submarines and air force. Germany could only have a navy of 6 battleships, only an army of 100,000 men, so on and so forth. Germany lost territory. Germany could not place troops in the Rhineland. So Germany and Hitler, as Hitler becomes powerful and as Hitler becomes the ruler, it's almost like Hitler uses the Treaty of Versailles as his game plan in reverse. One of the first things that Hitler does is that he puts troops into the Rhineland. He starts to build up the military. He starts to build up the navy. He starts to invade. Eventually he gets into the Alsace-Lorraine. Eventually he goes into Poland. Eventually he takes the Sudetenland, this area in Czechoslovakia. And every time Hitler advances, the world appeases his aggression. And so you can almost look at Germany's punishment for World War I and just kind of go in reverse, and that's Hitler's initial rise to power and plan of attack. Now eventually Hitler is going to take a look at the World War I strategy of avoiding to fight this war on 2 fronts. He's going to placate Stalin with a Pact of Friendship. Hitler is going to be very interested in, or at least Hitler knows that Stalin is interested in getting ice-free ports in this region here. Ice-free ports. Previously Stalin only has St. Petersburg or Stalingrad Leningrad. This is Leningrad up here. Leningrad, St. Petersburg. So this city is surrounded by ice for several months out of the year, and so Stalin is interested in gaining some ice-free ports. Hitler knows this, so Hitler proposes a Pact of Friendship with Russia in order to avoid then fighting this war on 2 fronts. So Hitler then, placating Stalin, attacks by going around, by going around the Maginot Line, by going around and trying to quickly take Paris. One of Hitler's last aggressive moves before the actual start of the war is to invade the Sudetenland. The Sudetenland was the edge of Czechoslovakia, and so this is an invasion of a nation, and this was kind of the last event in which the world would stand by. And so the world, led by the British, met Hitler in Munich for a conference, and the conference resulted in Hitler pledging not to be aggressive in action anymore. He pledged that he would be done. Of course, then less than a half year later, he invades Poland. So this policy of appeasement, which was championed at the Munich conference after Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia, was a horrible mistake by Britain and the rest of the world for that matter. Once Hitler invades Poland, September 1939, then war is going to erupt. And Hitler, of course, is ready for this, and so Hitler attacks Paris. The British come in at the last minute to help help Paris, and it results in this miracle at Dunkirk, in which the French and the British are evacuated out of mainland Europe. And so we'll look at this, the defeat of France, miracle at Dunkirk, the evacuation of troops from France. France is defeated, and then Hitler makes France surrender. Hitler makes France surrender at the same place in which Hitler and the Germans, well, not Hitler, but the Germans were forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler signs a peace treaty with France 20 years, almost exactly 20 years later, where the World War I treaty was signed at the Palace of Versailles. A great animated map of the fall of France and the miracle at Dunkirk can be found at the BBC, and these are great animated maps that will explain this very nicely. If you have time to look at those, just Google the BBC World War II Fall of France animated map. Once France falls, then Hitler, of course, then focuses on Britain and the Battle of Britain. So Britain stands alone against the Axis powers. The United States is not involved in the war at this point. The United States will not become involved until end of 1941, December of 1941. So Hitler unleashes his bombers against Britain, and the Royal Air Force fights against Hitler and the Germans. And this is a very famous quote by Winston Churchill, but it talks about, if the British Empire and its Commonwealth lasts for 1,000 years, men will say that this was their finest hour. So that's Winston Churchill, who becomes Prime Minister of England, of Britain, during the Battle of Britain. Now, one of the biggest mistakes then by Hitler is that rather than focusing specifically just on Great Britain and defeating Great Britain, he then extends his troops and his efforts down in North Africa. And the idea here is to take, in particular, the Suez Canal, take Egypt, and then maybe combine his troops as they come up into the Soviet Union, in particular the rich oil fields of the Middle East. Then his oil fields could supply his tank. So Rommel, Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, again, more animated maps at BBC. Erwin Rommel is very famous in his battles with the French and then eventually the United States in North Africa. Famous battle at Tunisia and also at El Alamein in Egypt. Some other very important figures of World War II, of course, we have then General Eisenhower, eventually President Eisenhower, and one of the most famous and colorful American soldiers of World War II Europe was George Patton. A couple of good movies about George Patton. George Patton was oftentimes a larger-than-life figure. He was also very courageous and daring, bold and cocky, arrogant tank commander. Sometimes got into trouble, sometimes had to be disciplined, but a very successful field commander. And the British had a commander called Bernard Montgomery, Monty, probably one of the most famous, as far as Americans go, most famous British commander that Americans know. He was kind of George Patton's counterpart. After the African campaign, you can take a look at this. The African campaign was successful. Then there became an effort to land either with either with an amphibious assault or with an aerial parachute exercise, but to gain Sicily and then to march up the boot of Italy and to attack the soft underbelly of Europe. And so that was Operation Torch, 1942. And then we have some interesting pictures here as Benito Mussolini, the Italian commander, eventually, or the Italian leader, is eventually captured and executed. And so 500,000 Allied troops landed in Sicily, and then eventually Italy surrenders. An extremely important part of this was the effort by the Allied bombers and the Royal Air Force. The Royal Air Force bombed at night, and the American force bombed at daytime because we felt like we could be a lot more precise in our bombing. But the United States and the British eventually, by 1943, gained some air superiority and hammered industrial Germany and also the infrastructure, roads, bridges, railroads, and very important. And then also the Battle of the Sea and the advancements in sonar equipment, depth charges, eventually aircraft carriers become very important in World War II. Very interesting part of this war. A few more images of the aerial campaign. Of course, the aerial campaign was also prevalent in the Pacific as well. And just a reminder that over 200,000 American pilots, just pilots, died, or aviators died in World War II alone. And then we have one of the most famous days in American military history, and that's the D-Day, June 6, 1944, and the operation of Overlord, the long-awaited Allied invasion of northern France, led by Dwight Eisenhower. So many different aspects. You could almost spend a whole semester just talking about D-Day, the French resistance, the deception campaign. But 5,000 troops landed, troop transports, landing craft, and warships, 150,000 U.S., British, and Canadian troops. The paratroopers, those that jump behind enemy lines the night before or early in the morning. Anyway, a couple really great movies, Saving Private Ryan. The first 6 minutes of that movie probably demonstrate the invasion force better than any movie. And then also Band of Brothers, put together by HBO, and Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, but the Band of Brothers series. The second episode deals exclusively with the paratroopers as they land in behind enemy lines on June 6, 1944. This opens up a very important third front against Hitler. So as we mentioned, this third front, let's see if we can demonstrate this. You have initially the double cross of Hitler against the Soviet Union, and so you have the Soviet Union attacking against Germany here, and then you have this march up the boot of Italy, so you have an attack here, and then this third front, this invasion in northern France, D-Day. So you have this attack here. So Hitler is forced to fight this war on three fronts, and it's a long voyage still. It's a long way to go, but eventually the writing becomes writing on the wall, and Hitler is going to be defeated. The Germans are going to be defeated. As these three fronts are opening up against Hitler, he does have some counterattacks. Fall of 1944, So June of 1944 is D-Day, but by the fall of 1944, the Germans counterattack. The Germans also launched the V-1s and V-2 rockets. And then the winter of 1944, the Battle of the Bulge, is the Germans' final offensive. Again, that is demonstrated in the Band of Brothers series. Again, in the final 6 months of the war, as the United States gains air superiority, the flying fortresses, the B-17, continues to launch their aerial campaigns, and this is kind of putting the final nail in the coffin for Hitler. And again, we have the production levels in the United States and the B-29, Boeing B-29 Super Fortress, the bomber that won the war for the United States and Britain. As it becomes evident that the war is going to be won by the United States and the Allies, the Big Three get together. The Big Three known as Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt. So these guys get together to discuss the end of the war. If you look, you can almost tell how bad Roosevelt looks. He's going to die shortly after. He's on at the end of his life. But these guys are getting together to discuss the future of Germany, to discuss the future of Europe. And so it's a very important meeting. The Soviets agree that at the end of the war they're going to help the United States win in Japan. This then definitely has an impact on how we decide to fight that battle, the battle in Pacific, the battle against Japan. And so there's other important things here, but the organization of the United Nations is developed. All these things are discussed at the Yalta Conference with these Big Three. And then one of the last things we'll just briefly talk about, again we could spend a whole semester here just on the Holocaust, but as the United States marches through Germany, as the Germans are falling to defeat, we stumble across these horrible concentration camps and the German systematic slaughter of the European Jews, the genocide of a race, the deliberate annihilation of entire people, and this idea that you have extermination camps and gas chambers. 6 to 7 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust. And again, the Band of Brothers series has a great episode, one of the last episodes in which the Band of Brothers stumble across a concentration camp. So as far as a short kind of just video episode of that, Band of Brothers does a good job. Of course, there are many other videos. You have Schindler's List is probably going down as one of the most raw and effective movies demonstrating the horrible existence of concentration camp. But these are maps then of where they existed throughout all of Europe, or at least the northern part of Europe where Germany had control during World War II. So it's hard to do justice in just 20 short minutes in a PowerPoint presentation. These are a couple of the leaders. Just wanted to again apologize for the quickly going through this. You could spend a whole semester just on the European side of World War II. Remember, this is the first of 3 short presentations focusing on chapter 34 and 35 of your textbook, but World War II. This will be divided into the European presentation, then also the Pacific presentation, war against Japan, and then finally the war and how it affected the home front. Again, a reminder that all the images within this presentation are in the public domain. Please do not hesitate to contact me or call, email if you have any questions regarding this presentation. And this concludes part 1 of 3 World War II presentations. Thank you.